We are talking about not being a bottleneck, basically. Otherwise, better said as the key role you should play in your business to get bigger results. But what we basically mean is like how to think about your role so that you don't bottleneck things, because I think that is one of the easiest things to do kind of as I think as a business owner, you just wear so many hats. You're like the content creator and the coach or, the service provider and it's so easy to become the bottleneck. So today we are going to talk about how to not do that, which will hopefully be very helpful. Hi, Alessia. Megan is queen of helping us build processes so we're not the bottleneck. So we will talk about all of that. And then if y'all have any questions, obviously let us know. Hey, Mandy. And we're giving away our content repurposing bundle today. So it walks you through everything in terms of like planning content for 3 months, but it also walks you through how we save and repurpose it, which I think is sort of it's all important, but I was going to say the most important part of it, because it's like, if you're going to create it, you really want to be doing something with it. Like if you're going to spend that time and energy to create it, making sure that you can reuse it is like one of the most important things in my opinion. So
I think that's what like helps you actually like leverage the time and energy that you're putting in. That's really when you start to see it pay off more and more over time too, is when you're really repurposing and reusing the content.
Yeah. And it's when it doesn't feel like, why am I doing it? Like if you're feeling like, why am I putting this much effort into content, then you need to be thinking about repurposing, because it really alleviates some of that, because it doesn't just feel like, oh my God, this is so much work. Why is it not like doing more of what I want it to do? And that's kind of what fixes that. So if you comment today, you will be entered to win that. As always, we're here to answer your questions. Megan is always so great about answering any questions you have related to team, system, strategies, any of that. So let us know what we can do for you and we will get started. I know we always do this and this is obvious, but maybe just tell everybody who you are or where they can find you too, because I feel like it's just so like everyone should know Megan, but just in case someone doesn't.
Yeah, just in case. So I'm Megan Schopieray. I am the COO of A Lit Up Life, and I'm also an online business manager for 6 and 7 figure business owners. My team and I are at Whitespace.team, and together we basically provide just all of the back end support for other business owners. And I really specialize in just kind of like all of the back-end operations, making sure that everything runs smoothly on a day-to-day basis, making sure that the business keeps moving forward. We'll talk a lot about that today, like how do we keep things on track? How do we make sure that, things operate really smoothly on the back end, both obviously from kind of like a team dynamic, but also bringing the CEO in that and kind of like making sure that everything is functioning super smoothly, like all together. So
you are so good at it. We are so grateful to you. Hey, Lynn's happy Monday. So, one of the things like I hear from clients the most, and I'm wondering if you do too, but well, you probably don't because you fix it for them. But if you hear initially the most is like this idea of like just feeling like everything rests on their shoulders, kind of, which in part is true because we're like, you're the CEO of your own business. Like to an extent, you kind of have to balance that idea of the fact that like you are always going to be the one that kind of has to have like the final say and the final, like the buck stops with you basically. But I also feel like then there's a way where we normalize that too much, where it's just like, okay, that's fine. Then it just always falls on me and it always rests on me. And I think there's like such an interesting middle ground,
Yeah.
So anyway, I just see clients get stuck in that place sometimes. And it's usually one side or the other. They're either like, everything's on me, it's all me, or they're like, nothing should be on me. Why is this happening? And I'm super frustrated. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think like in general, I do think that the idea of delegation is a difficult conversation because I think it isn't all or nothing. And there are so many nuances around that I think that it's important to just have a conversation around that, because it's not like you can't ever delegate and everything falls on you or, something like that. But it's also not the opposite where like your team does everything and you just like show up and do nothing, right? So I think that it's kind of about figuring out what is that actually, unfortunately, figuring out like what is that in between where it feels good, right?
Yes. Thank you. Lindsay says she just loves us together so much. So too high. I'm so grateful for you, Megan. Hi, Michelle. Yeah, but I think you're so right. It's like this sort of is always the middle ground of both. And anytime you're trying to play on either end, you're probably going to be frustrated. So we're going to talk about basically like how to move things forward, but how to also do that without being the bottleneck, but also to know that you have an active role in that process, right? Like, it's going to move forward because you're helping it move forward, not because you completely step out of it in every imaginable way either. It really is going to look like a little bit of both. So one of the first things, it sounds like such a small thing, but for us has been so helpful, is to just have placeholders for things that you need to do. So basically what I mean by that is like, say there's like many moving parts to something, like say you're setting up an email sequence and your team has to go and like build the funnel and active campaign, or say you're even just like, I'll use us as an example, like for our weekly emails that we send, you guys know, if you're on our list, like we send a ton of resources out every week. So some of that is like an intro that needs to get written, but a lot of it is like other resources that we're linking up and sharing. So instead of waiting until Lacey writes the intro to get it all ready, what team does is they get a bunch of stuff ready and they put placeholders where I need to have my input. And that has been so useful because it doesn't, like, my team's not waiting on me to get their stuff done. And so they don't feel animosity towards me because they're not like, oh my God, we're always waiting on her. But I also don't feel pressure because it's not like, oh my God, they can't even start getting the newsletter ready until I write this thing. Does that make sense?
And I think it's also one of those things where like, it also makes it a little bit more obvious, like who's doing what and who's late. Like, what is something that you're responsible for in your writing and all of that, because we're very clearly outlining like placeholder, like text and stuff like that. So you're not feeling like you're going in something and you're not clear, like what you're supposed to be doing, or team's not unclear on like, what are we supposed to prep versus what's Lacey doing? And I think it just like helps to kind of identify those two things, which is super useful for everybody, right?
Absolutely. And, for me personally, this may or may not be true for everyone else. Like that actually helps my brain a lot more. Like it's much easier when I see the piece I have to fill in than when I have to be the starting point. And I think that a lot of business owners feel like they always have to be the starting point. So like another example of this, I almost hate to mention this because I feel like y'all are going to get me derailed here, but I'm going to try it. But we have something else exciting that we are sharing with y'all soon, very soon. And we were working on a page for it. And I basically was like, hey, can someone just build out this page? And I know there's parts that aren't done yet. And I know there's things you need from me, but I just need to see it. And then I can like go back to it. And so one, we're not waiting to build the page until Lacey feels like everything is perfect. And two, it actually helps me in the process a lot more, but neither part is bottlenecking it. So that has been like just really, really, really useful to be able to ask for placeholders. Like, I think sometimes that's something we don't even think we can ask for or whatever. Like we make up this rule that like we have to deliver it perfect or not. And most of the time that's why you're feeling like a bottleneck, because you're waiting until you get it perfect, right?
It's kind of like the idea, like the same type of idea of like, it's easier to work from like with writing or something. It's easier to work from an outline, or it's easier to work from like kind of like like bullet points and notes or something like that versus just writing from scratch. Like it's easier to kind of have some type of structure, something to kind of guide you in your writing. And I think that obviously it's applying to writing, but I think that applies to so many other things too. Like even just thinking about like strategy as something of like a launch or something like that. I think the same thing kind of applies to like, how are we mapping out dates and kind of looking at the timelines and due dates and all of that, it's easier to kind of start from a little bit of like placeholders and kind of then start to fill in the gaps there.
Absolutely. Or like you were saying, a launch or something like that. Like I can also see how we've done that with different things about like, you'll map out a process and you'll even put placeholders of like where I need to decide how I want things done. But again, it's so much easier for me to make those decisions because of the placeholder, not in spite of it, but also you didn't have to wait for me to make that decision to map it. Because I think that is when our team can build a little bit of annoyance and even resentment for us because they're waiting on us to take action before they can do their tasks. And that can feel super, super frustrating. Hey, Jordan, Shantae said another surprise. Oh my goodness. Okay. Actually, I feel like we're full of them. So we had Sabs as a surprise. Then we have one coming soon. And then we have another one coming in December. So I feel like Megan's like, wait, what are these? She knows.
I think I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I obviously do, but.
Yeah. So I feel like we're going to be full of them by the end of this year.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. Okay. Not to get off track here. Having the layout feels so much better than the blank page for me as well. Exactly. In all regards. Right. So I love you, Shantae. She said, what is happening? Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, one of them will tell you, I think very soon. And then one of them will tell you December 5th. The December 5th one I would say is the bigger one. Would you agree with that, Megan? Yeah. Cool. So December 5th, which happens to be a Monday, which happens to mean we have a live stream. So yay.
Fancy that.
So yes, have placeholders, like in all regards, whether it's your strategy, it's your writing, it's your building something out, whatever, have that, ask for that, be willing to lean into that. It sounds like such a simple thing, but it has just been like a game changer for me and not feeling super stressed out, like everyone's waiting on me. And it has also been, I think, a game changer for our team of not feeling like they have to wait on me. You know what I mean? Yeah.
100%.
Wow, wonderful. But also this makes sense on how you're able to move quickly with all of this because of this support. Yes, 100%. Megan is why we are moving quickly on this. If Megan was not part of this, I do not think December 5th would be our reality. So she is the singular reason. Megan's laughing because she knows it's true.
Yeah, I mean,
she's like, I can't even argue with that. That's just, those are just facts. Yeah,
probably.
Oh my God, Jess, I'm dying. Lacey's selling a clone of herself in the metaverse. I mean, if that were an option, I would, no, I'm kidding. I would entertain it. So, okay, placeholders, your best friend. Another thing that I think has helped us a lot, and like this may or may not be your issue, but it's definitely been mine. So we'll talk about it. But just remembering that things don't have to be done how you would do them, and they don't even have to be done as well as you would do them. So that was like a really tough one for me at the beginning of business, because I just felt like there was a way I would do it and I would do it the best. And like, I know some people are like, I have the opposite problem. I don't think I would do it well at all, but like, they're kind of two sides of the same coin where like, you're just kind of over controlling or perfecting the process. Right. And so for me, when I stopped being the bottleneck is when I realized that, like, number one, Megan can do most things way better than I could do them. But number two, it like literally doesn't even matter. Even if most of the people on our team didn't do it as well as me, which in some regards is going to be true. Because it's my business, right? Like how could they? Like it actually doesn't matter. Like the bottleneck is believing that it has to be done a certain way or as good as you can. And like having that standard in your business, like that will forever create a bottleneck, is like believing that to be true. Right.
Mm-hmm. And I think like ultimately too, like, I think it's easy to get caught up into the details of like this looking a very specific way or being a very specific way. And in the details, like that is not ultimately where the results come from. Right. And so I think that that's a good question and kind of like a good filter of like, if there's something in your business that like a team has done, you're like, oh, it's not the way I would have done it, or I would have done that better or whatever. Does it matter? Like, does that actually impact your bottom line? And if it does, then obviously it's a conversation to have and like something to work on. But most of the time I would say like it actually doesn't impact like your sales, your clients.
And it would be like,
like
how
that.
much does it impact your bottom line
Right.
even too? Because it's like,
Right.
if it impacts it, but by like maybe one less client or something like that, that's still probably not a big enough deal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, as Shantae said, same way the golden ticket happened. You know, what's so funny is I was actually thinking about that, Shantae. I'm like, maybe this year is just my time of year or something, because
I think it is too.
Megan's like, fuck off, it is. Because yeah, golden ticket was like this time last year, basically. I think I was just thinking about it maybe now, right? Or maybe even a little later. Like
it was later. It was
Thanksgiving.
December.
Yeah, so we're doing it a little earlier this year, but apparently this is my time to shine. Lacey's selling clothes, and I thought you were launching a clothing line. Definitely not launching a clothing line. I could tell you that for sure. That seems like an immeasurable amount of work to me. Yeah. Although that was really fun. Hannah says, yes, everything in me is like, it needs to be exactly the way I would do it or literally drop dead right now, which is the most helpful. Right. Not helpful at all. I totally agree. And same, like, and that was just such a great learning for me to be like, it literally does not matter. Like, I could find almost no evidence of it mattering. And like, the more I released that, the more I stopped being a bottleneck, because it wasn't like, oh, but did we like do it in this exact way? And it would be like, who actually cares? Like, that is like one of the main philosophies I feel like I brought to team over the years, having learned that lesson, is like, I don't care how you do it. I just care about the outcome. But I used to care very much about how it got done. And that made it really, really hard for anyone else to do it, you know? So just like looking at that and being like, is there places where you're telling yourself a story that is not true? Because likely there is, if you're the bottleneck right now, you know? Yeah. Is there something, Megan, that you find especially frustrating that clients do with that? It's okay if I'm the example, but like as a team member, like, is there something that you see that's like super frustrating?
I think that for me, the biggest thing that feels frustrating is when I know I can help and I would offer help or team help, like some type of support to help move something forward. And then like the, client, like CEO side of it is like, no, I'll handle it. And then like things take a really long time or like don't get done or something like that. And it's like, the support's there. Right. And so I think that that's like just a really good thing to think about. And I feel like that's kind of been something that like would potentially have been more of an issue in the past. I feel like now, like all of my clients are very much like, I got it. Like, I know that Megan's there, and I'll also just repeat it a few times. Like, are you sure you don't need anything on this or something? So I think it's like one of those things where if your team is there and they're offering help, like it's likely that they want to help you, and it's actually helpful for them to help you too. So really being open to that kind of thing and seeing if there are ways, even if it's not, like, even if it is just like adding placeholders or something like that, that can just start to move things forward a little bit more.
Yes. So good. So true. Jess said, no, wait, it feels like the golden ticket was like yesterday. I so agree with that. It is mind blowing to me that like a year has passed. In some ways, I feel like I've lived 100 lifetimes this year, because obviously like so much has happened this year. Like, I'm like in a new home. We lost my dad. We had Bennett. We lost my dog. I mean, it just feels like a lifetime, but also I'm like, that was literally 2 weeks ago. It's just so bizarre. Bizarre.
It's like a time warp this year.
It really is. It really is. So next thing I would say is stop making last minute decisions is another way to not be the bottleneck. Like, I think one of the number one ways I see clients bottleneck themselves is because they're deciding on things so last minute that their team doesn't have time to help them execute. And I think that's really important, which like, if you're constantly feeling stressed, overwhelmed, and like you're the bottleneck, you have to ask yourself, like, is it because you're doing things last minute? Is it because you're changing things last minute? Is it because you're making decisions last minute? Like, one thing Megan's really great at is like having good boundaries around stuff like that. So if I want to do something last minute, it usually does need to be on me,
Mhm.
right? Because she's not going to have teams scramble, and nor do I want them to, right? And so that's obviously our setup, and it's like really helpful that we have that, but like maybe your team is doing the same, but you're taking it in a negative way as opposed to a positive way. You're like, oh my God, it's all on me. See, instead of being like, well, it's all on me because I'm not making decisions in advance. I'm not like being planful. I'm not like doing the things that would be required of me not to be a bottleneck. So I think that's really important to just call out, because I think it's too easy to like be the entrepreneur with the idea. Again, trust me, I do that. And I'm obviously in a season of that, I guess, at this time of year. But it's always like with the intention of like, cool, what needs to happen here? What's realistic to happen here? What can we pull back on if it can't happen? Like, instead of like, it just has to happen and I have to do it, like all that's like never the move, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So clients ask for things last minute, you push back, it ends up on them. How does that usually go?
I mean, I think so a lot of like, from my perspective, what that looks like is like, client has idea, they're super excited about it, want to execute on it. And it is like, what I see my job being in that moment is like talking through like what would need to happen in order to move that forward, right?
Yeah.
And that's the conversation to have. And so like, this has happened with you and I think that this is like the conversation around the golden ticket was like,
Yeah.
you know, with that, like, because it was a shorter turnaround time and obviously like very brand new, and a lot of it was like,
What the fuck are
even
we
if we
doing?
had, I mean, also like, I mean, let's be real, if it had been a longer turnaround time, you probably still would have had to do a lot of that just because of the nature of
Agree.
the NFT and like the educational aspect of all of that. But like, just kind of like in terms of the timeline, we had a conversation around like, cool, a lot more than normal was falling on you to really move things forward because of that turnaround time. And
Yeah.
and you were like, cool, got this. Like, this is more important to just move things forward rather than to wait a couple extra months and like create a longer runway for it and yada yada. So it was like, just having that conversation though is super helpful on the team end, just because I think that it's easy for like the CEO to have an idea, be super excited, want to move forward, and team just kind of assumes the position of like, oh, now I'm in a rush to move things forward and I have to take this on and do all this stuff. And my philosophy has always been like, I am just always going to be having a frank conversation with clients. So like, cool, if you want that to move forward this quickly, this is what that means. And this is what I would need from you. Or here's what is realistic in terms of turnaround times on team as well.
Right. So it's like, if I had said with the golden ticket, it's fine, then I'll do it all, but then didn't actually have time to execute on that, like that would have been a disaster and I would have been the bottleneck, and you guys would have been frustrated at me because I would have like promised all these things I wasn't delivering on, and I would have been frustrated at you because I would have wanted it to move faster and it just wouldn't have worked. So it's almost like you either have to plan in advance or you have to know you have the space to take on what you're saying you're willing to take on. With the golden ticket, I happened to have that space at that time, so it really did work out. But like, I would say for the majority of the year, that probably wouldn't have been true. And I would have had to be like, okay, I'm not willing to like be the bottleneck, make myself and my team miserable. And so I have to have a longer runway. It just depends, you know?
100%.
It's one of the hardest parts about growing a team for me is walking the relationship between vision and turnaround. Yes, I totally hear that, Morgana. I think that, I think that is where like really open, direct conversations come in. Like, I think for Megan and I, that has always been the ticket of like, where are you willing to flex because it feels good, and where are you not? Like, where's the line? You know what I mean? Like, of course, sometimes the team's willing to take on more because like we're moving something forward, but also like there has to be a line or a boundary there. And so I think just being able to communicate that really openly is super helpful and important. Like, I feel like we've had a lot of these conversations recently for the new project we have coming up. And, it's like has felt like a moving target. I think it changes, you know what I mean, on any given week on like what we're able to do, what we're feeling comfortable with. But I think just being willing to have those conversations is the best part. I don't know if you agree with that, Megan, just like the
Yeah,
constantly
totally.
coming back to those conversations.
And I think that it's one of those things that's really important too, because nothing happens that doesn't impact other things.
Yeah,
right. And so like this
totally.
project that we're talking about that will hear about next month, like that has impacted other things where like other things have just kind of been like, cool, we're pausing these things for now and we'll circle back in January or February or something like that. And so I think it's important to also, when you are talking about things, to talk through how that impacts other projects as well, because
Yeah, totally.
even just in terms of like, if team is needing you for something, right? Like if we needed you for, I don't know, we'll just like something else. Like if we wanted to do something for like the NFT or something like that.
Yeah.
What podcast, whatever. Like we would also need to know, like, okay, is this new project going to be a higher priority? So really making sure that we're not moving forward on the other stuff and feeling like, oh, we're still dedicating a ton of time toward this, and then waiting on Lacey, and now Lacey's the bottleneck just because we deprioritize that project because you're focusing somewhere else. Does that make sense? Like,
yes,
almost
100%.
like,
because if
just,
you're not going to be the bottleneck here, you might still be it over
Yeah.
here. So they all have
Right.
to work together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Okay. So then another one, is delegate decisions, which I know this is easier said than done sometimes, but for me, this has been like, I think one of the game changer of getting me out of being the bottleneck, which is just trusting Megan to make decisions on my behalf. Because if you have to make every single decision in your business, again, at a certain point, you can't not be the bottleneck of everything, right? So I'm not saying you have to do it like immediately with a new person that just came on your team, but ideally you build trust in a relationship with someone that's on your team to the point where you can delegate decisions to them. And again, sometimes I think that we just forget we even can. So it's just important to say that, because, it's so easy to just like, oh, that has to be me. I have to decide that. But the more I've been like, well, what if I didn't have to decide that? What if Megan just decided that? Like, it's been so freeing to see, like, I almost always trust her decisions. And if she did make one that I wouldn't make, it's almost never that impactful. So it doesn't matter anyway. Like if I would have picked this image versus that image that she picked, like it literally matters zero. But the fact that I didn't have to make that decision sped everything in the process up. So I think just like knowing that that's even an option for you to just be like, what if you just decided? Caveat. Then you have to support that decision. You can't be like, what if you just decided? And then everything they decide, you're like, not that, because then you're the bottleneck again. But it's kind of amazing to think about how easy and freeing that is, right?
And I think it's one of those things where like, I think it sounds really scary at the beginning and it gets easier. Like, and I would say like, start with small decisions that, like choosing images or, something like that. And then the more that you get into a rhythm of that, like not only are you building trust in your team, like you're trusting their decisions and seeing like, yes, they can make good decisions and I support them and blah, blah, blah. And then they're also gaining trust back in you. Where like, it's safe for me to make decisions in this business because I'm supported in the decision I make, even if it's not like the one that Lacey would have made. I know that she's still going to have my back no matter what. And I think that just allows your team to like feel more comfortable taking on more responsibilities and just feeling more confident in making more decisions or bigger decisions or whatever. And so I think it's one of those things that it really does build over time, where now I feel like there's very little in a lit up life that I'd feel totally uncomfortable making any decision. Like I feel like even if I wouldn't know exactly, I'd be pretty close in knowing what would Lacey decide. But that's also because we've worked together for so long and we've been practicing that for so long too.
Right. And that's kind of the value of like letting your team start to practice that, because like Megan was saying, then over time, it gets to the point where you feel like someone can make almost any decision for you. Like I really felt the impact of that when I took maternity leave. And like, I think there was maybe like one thing that y'all reached out to me for. And it was like a very nuanced thing that like, I probably wouldn't, like, I didn't even know what to, I mean, I figured it out, but like, it's not like I was just like, you know what I mean? Like, had an answer off the cuff. So it frees you up immeasurably when you do that over time. I think, again, at the beginning, can it be the hardest thing to do? Sure. Can it be the thing that maybe feels the scariest? Yes. But again, you'll always be the bottleneck and you'll always have to do it unless you start somewhere. And like Megan said, start somewhere small, like this graphic or this graphic, that picture, this post or that post, like stuff that like literally might just irritate you, but would mean nothing to anyone in your audience. Like watch those things and let them be evidence that it's like feels really good to just not have to decide. Sometimes I think that we forget how great that can feel, because in business, we're making 1,000 decisions a day. So to feel like there are times you don't have to and can delegate, that is really freeing, but it also just saves you time. It saves your team time because they're not waiting on your decisions all the time. I think like that is where you become the bottleneck, is where there's 6 things that can't move forward because they're waiting on your decision on them. Like, that's so unhelpful. You can lose days of work on that, because it's like, I'm on calls a lot too. So it's like, if they're always waiting on my decision, then, you know, say it's a day where I have calls, well, I don't get to it till that evening or maybe even the next morning. They've lost a day and a half already, you know?
And that's just compounded too, if like you and your team are in different time zones or different schedules or anything like that can really delay things significantly. I think about it too, in terms of like, not only is it just going to allow things to move forward faster with team and everything like that, but it's also really like saving your brain space a lot more, and just like not putting you in decision fatigue of like making all of the small decisions. And so I think like the more that you can start to delegate, especially the small things, to your team, so that not every single thing is falling on you, and then the decisions that are coming to you are the ones that actually matter and have more significance and have more weight, that really should be you deciding, kind of thing.
Exactly, because there are going to be a lot of decisions in your business that just have to be you no matter what. And so like knowing that you have like the resources, like literally mentally, for that is so important, because there are some non-escapable things there, right? You know, it's not like, oh, Megan just makes every decision in a lit up life and I don't have to participate. Like, it's not that. It's just that she makes so many of them that like I have the bandwidth to make the bigger ones. And so that is like really, really, really helpful. And I think another way, I was thinking about this today, another way that we do this is I talk through a lot of my decisions with Megan. Like, even if I know for the most part what I'm probably going to do or whatever, I'll typically talk through it with her and ask. Like today we were talking about something, and, you know, it was just super helpful because you asked like a lot of insightful questions about it. It really helped me to process, but mostly what it's going to help us do is make it so that in the future, like that's an easier decision. And it's just like, this is what we do for this, versus like, we have to process it over and over again. So that's just something else too. Whereas like, if you're not quite ready to delegate certain decisions, just process it through with your team member. And like that will even help them get like, oh, this is how she thinks about decisions. This is how she's making it. So then it's easier for them to do it moving forward. Like it's just a muscle they're going to build.
And even if it's as simple as like I might already know partially how you would think about something. So I might make the decision partially, like, here are 2 options of that I think like you could potentially decide on, rather than just like giving like, here's a situation that happened. What do you want to do? It's like, here's the situation. Do you want to do this or this? So it's a little bit almost like you're helping your team understand, just getting like pushing decisions even further. So it's not you needing to kind of like start from scratch on that, right?
Which is also what makes it move faster, because if Megan comes to me and is like, do you want to do this or this? I can like, I got that. You know what I mean? That's like 5 minutes, right? If you're like, here's this thing, have at it. I'm like, I'm kind of between things in the minute, so I'm going to have to think about that later, and I'm going to have to get back to you. And like it, again, bottleneck stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think like one real quick, just like in terms of like bottlenecking, like I think one thing that is really important, just in terms of like turnaround times of how quickly you respond, like one of the things that does really, really help our team move forward is that you do respond and check in pretty regularly, like when you can. And so we're not waiting like days before we get a response on anything. Or even if you know that you're like, hey, it's going to be days before I can get to this, you'll at least say like, hey, it's going to be days before I can circle back to this, right? So just having that communication with your team can be super helpful. Like that's not to say you need to like respond to them in 2 seconds and like constantly be, you know, having like Slack open on your computer at all times or anything like that, but making sure that you are connected with your team where they can expect some type of regular turnaround time in responses has been really helpful, because I just think that helps things move forward more quickly. And on the team end, on the team end of that, like making it easy for the business owner to make quick responses. And like if you're in between calls, like a simple like yes or no on these things versus like you need 10 minutes just to like think through the problem or something like that. So kind of like both ends, making it so that like decisions and communication can be a little bit more streamlined there.
I can even think of a situation recently where you asked me something and I think I was like, yes, jumping on a call, but yes, we'll circle back with like details later or something like that. Right. But it was just like enough for you to be like, cool, we're going to do this. And then like, we can get the details of it later. But I think things like that really do matter. Like you said, and you know, this is not this live stream, but I feel like we talk about it every live stream because I'm so passionate about this, is like, if you want your team to respond quickly, I suggest you do it too, because you can't set the culture and the precedent that like you take days to respond to them, but when you have something, they should jump in 5 minutes. Like that's not how it works. So I try to be really present and engaged because ideally I want my team to be really present and engaged. And so that goes both ways, right? Alessia says, I have a question, ladies. How do you make sure there is still your energy behind things done by the team, especially, for example, social media posts and feeling the connection with your audience? For some reason, I'm afraid about this aspect. Lynn says, great question. So for me, it's way more of like an overall feeling than like a one specific thing. Like I'm not usually like, I have to be connected to this one post to see results. I'm like, I have to feel connected to like the conversations we're having with our audience, or I have to feel connected to like things we're sending out this week or whatever. So I'll look at all of our content we're putting out for the week before it goes out, but I don't necessarily need to be the one to physically post it. But I still feel very connected to like the topic and the conversation we're fostering that week. And I think that that's what's important about it. It's not necessarily like, I have to put the email in to be connected to the email, or I have to come up with the plan to feel connected to the plan or whatever. It's more like, I just have to like know overarchingly that we're moving in a direction that feels good, that we're sharing things that feel really good and feel connected to like the bigger vision of what we're doing, which I think is kind of the epitome of like CEO thinking, is being connected to the bigger vision versus every small detail. I think that as a CEO, you almost have to release being connected to every small detail, or it's, again, you're a bottleneck and it's hard to move forward. So for me, it's like big vision connection versus like one specific task. But I don't know what you think about that, Megan.
I think it's also like finding like what pieces of the whole process. Like, I think it's like one of those things where you don't need to be the one connected to every single piece of the process. But I think like finding the areas in the process that do feel like you're most connected with and feel most important to you, staying in those, and then letting yourself delegate some of the other things. That like posting is a great one for social media. I know that like a lot of people feel this way about like client onboarding, like one-on-one client onboarding experiences and stuff like that. And I think that's another great one where like you can have a lot of like personal connection with that process, but also like let your team send the invoice, let your team like deliver, like pick up, you might even pick out the gift or something, but like let your team purchase it and like deal with like shipping and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's one of those things where like there are pieces of the process that you can stay connected to while delegating other parts.
I think such a good example of this for us, Megan, that you just made me think of that I think we do well is like, for example, those client lesson stories I do on Instagram. I record the client lessons, but I record them like, you know, a decent amount in advance. And our team is the one that captions them and posts them. But I am the one that responds to every DM. Like my team doesn't do our DMs at all on Instagram. I do every single one of them. So like, that makes me feel super connected, but I didn't have to like, I don't even remember what client lesson is going out most days. Like, you know, we're like a month in advance. So it's not like I'm like, oh, today is this, but I feel really connected to it because when someone responds and is like, oh, this resonated with this way, or, you know, what do you think about this or whatever, like I'm the one in there having that conversation. So that's super helpful too. It feels like I'm connected to the part that matters versus the part that wouldn't necessarily make me feel more connected in a way. Like writing out the caption wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, my energy's behind this. It would just be like a checkbox I was doing. But being in the DMs with somebody that's saying this really resonated with me, like, yeah, that is going to like change my energy around it, you know?
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I think there are ways to do it. I used to post in the group every day for ages because it made me feel connected to the group. When I was on maternity leave, we stopped doing that. But like, you know, I'm on this live every week. I look in the group every day. Like, they're just small ways that don't, you know, even just like being in the group every day without having a task for the group is like another way to stay connected, where it's not like a bottleneck task where people are waiting on me to do something, but it's just a way to like be there and be present. Kind of like DMs. Like I might leave a DM for a week if I need to or whatever. So it's not like I'm bottlenecking it in the sense that like nothing can move forward, but like I can still be there and engaged with that. So I hope that helps, but that's sort of how we think about it. Okay, what else? Having placeholders, doesn't needing to be how you do it, delegating decisions, not making last minute decisions. I think that's mostly it. But ultimately, like if you're the bottleneck in your business, it's probably because there is something you're telling yourself a story about. Either like I should be able to do all of this last minute, or I'm the only one that can decide, or I'm the only one that can do it this way, or like they have to wait for me to get this done. Like any of those stories that are popping up for you are things to look at and address, because ultimately like it could probably feel a lot easier than it does if you're constantly feeling like everyone is waiting on you. Like if I can think of one thing that stresses my clients out, maybe the biggest, aside from like obviously if you have like a super bad launch or something like that, but is like when they feel like everyone's waiting on them. Like that feeling is so heavy and it's so stressful, and it's like it's where you're like, I'll burn this shit to the ground kind of mindset sometimes, because it feels so like I think in our email we said like, is everyone waiting on you, weighing on you? And it's like, that's the perfect way to say it, because that is what can happen there, you know?
I think that's also like that for me brings up just the importance of systems in general. Like if there's something that you can't bring your team into the process and like delegate decisions on, or that like that you can't train them on like pieces of it at least, and everything is falling on you. Like I think that that's a really, obviously there will always be things that just are in your court and are your decisions to own as the CEO. But I think that there are things where like, if it's something that feels like only I can do this, and I wish I could delegate it to my team, I wish my team could handle this, but there's something there, then I think that that's like a systems process that needs to be addressed, because that's where like it might be something around like training your team on the system you have, or it might be something where like there isn't a system, or the system needs to be reassessed so that it's easier to delegate to your team and bring them into that process more.
So true. Such a good point. Such a good point that it's like yes, we need to do these things, but in order to do them, we need systems to do them. Megan has many of those. If you didn't know,
I do.
Megan has. I'm not just talking about in general, but I'm talking about Megan actually has like plug and play systems you can buy in your business. So she does have many, a system everywhere you can imagine. But she has them for like podcasting, for content, for podcast launch, for hiring, like all different things. So if you're like hearing this and being like, well, part of the reason I'm the bottleneck is because we don't even have a process. For me to not be, definitely jump over to Megan's website. I say this every time. I'm obsessed with her website. I have complete and total faith that one of her systems can help you if you are feeling that way. So whitespace.team is her website. But yeah, like that has to be there so that you can actually have a foundation to do this, everything we talked about from. Any thoughts on like the system you would start with?
I mean, typically I think it's anything around content and social media. Those are kind of the big ones. And then from there, I would say probably something around like, it kind of depends on your business model, but like client management, client onboarding, like something like that, the client experience, customer support types of things. I think those are kind of, it's almost like step one is a little bit more like getting people in to your sphere, right? And delegating pieces of that. And then step two is like, once people are in your sphere, making sure that they have a really good experience and having your team help with that process as well.
Love it. So good. All right. So whitespace.team, what is it like /systems?
Yes. Yeah.
I remember your links more than my own. How impressive is that? Whitespace.team /systems. We'll link it up if you need that. But thank you, Megan, as always, for being here. I think you are so useful, such an important conversation. I think so helpful to always be hearing from you too, because I think it's so easy to hear the business owner talk about what works or what they think works, but like having the team perspective is the most important. So appreciate you. I am so grateful to all of you for coming. Remember, if you comment today, you're entered to win our content repurposing bundle. And we will be back next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.